I went into this game at Passetto thinking the CMO is going to be our target customer. And after 10 months, I have learned that they do not own the full go-to-market. It's either owned by the CEO or the chief revenue officer, and the CMO can't fix the problem.
Being closest to your customer is obviously a central theme to this. And the content plus conversations is one of the best ways to do that.
The companies that are buying technology and investing a bunch of time to measure the success of their content is like trying to fix a light on a boat while there's a huge hole in it and the whole thing's sinking.
Asking the content marketer, prove the ROI of what you're doing is like asking somebody working at a car manufacturer whose job is to put the tires on the car, what's the ROI of what you're doing?
The car needs wheels. Your company needs a website. So saying, what is the ROI of the website? It doesn't make any sense.
I'm getting close to the point where I see essentially like a flagship content engine as just being something similar to the value and necessity of a website. I mean, would you agree with that?
The thing that I've learned is
all right, Chris. So this one is a little different from the normal ones we've been doing. So to date, basically, I think we've done 3 or 4 sessions. All of those have been live. This one is just me and you. And I figured,
sweet. I thought we were going to have an audience. Okay, cool.
Yeah, me and you.
Nice.
Just me and you.
Shop.
Yep. And I want to go deep on a few things. And for everybody who doesn't know, so Chris and I work closely together. We handle all of Chris's content. And one of the things that you have hit on recently with Passetto, the sort of, I would say, newer company that you're running, is really nailing after 10 months or so some of the messaging and points of view that you've evolved it into. I think you've always had the foundation of really like the insight of why you created the company and sort of the direction that you would take it. But it seems like developing the point of view over the last 30 days, 45 days or so has really taken a positive turn, and the market has responded. So one of the things, and I think that this is very related to what we talk about on our show and with all my content, is like content strategy. And so the question here is like, how can we develop our points of view in a way that resonate with the market and then can be transferred into our messaging everywhere, in terms of website, marketing collateral, content marketing, all of that. And using the content strategy to, number one, inform those points of view. And then number two, then have the railways to get that message out. So there's a lot we could go into there, but I think maybe first, do you just want to set a little context on like kind of those insights of like the last 30 days or so, and how that refinement of the points of view and messaging has gone for you?
Here is the massive insight for people, which if I can distill it down, it's that the hidden like 10x weapon for your company is actually your message and narrative. And so just in the month of October so far, and the month isn't even done yet, at my company Passetto, we've booked and closed more revenue and generated more pipeline in the first 27 days of October than we had the rest of the fucking year. The entire year of 2024, that's 9 months, and we did more in 26 days of October than we had in the first 9 months of the year in terms of revenue and pipeline. My content mix and distribution has not changed at all. I produce the same amount of podcasts every week. I put them on LinkedIn. They go on other channels. The content and distribution mix and volume has not changed at all. The only thing that's changed is what I'm saying. And when you're able to nail that becomes the thing that gives you this big growth from 0 to 10. And I believe maybe the impact is less dramatic and fast, but you could have almost the exact same reinvention at 100 million ARR by really nailing it. And so that's been a huge learning for me. That is pure data and almost an unarguable conclusion around the fact that what you say is actually the most important thing inside of the content. Now, I want to talk through a little bit of the process around how you get to this, because the first time I did it at my company, Refine Labs, it took me around 18 months to get to this
Mm.
like dialed in, say something, it resonates with the market, they feel the problem, they take action. And then at this time in my new company, Passetto, it's taken me about 8 months. And a couple of the key insights that I've learned, because I can talk through the tactical process, but let's talk about the key learnings that people should take away that are non-obvious. The first one is who you get your feedback from drives your company strategy. And there are a lot of companies that get their strategic feedback from customers from the wrong customers. And then that drives how they build their product, what go-to-market motions they run, how they invest in marketing. It drives how they message around the problem and the level of stakeholders inside of the company that the company solves for. And all that stuff gets driven. And if it's driven by the wrong person, then you end up building the wrong company. You're not going to know that overnight. I went into this game at Passetto thinking that the CMO is going to be our target customer. And after 10 months, I have learned that as powerful and capable as a CMO could be, they do not own the full go-to-market. It's either owned by the CEO or the chief revenue officer, depending on the org and reporting structure. And the CMO can't fix the problem. They can help the company see the problem, but the CEO or CRO actually has to fix it. And when I made that shift, it immediately you see the problem differently. Immediately you message the problem differently, and immediately you can quantify the problem differently. And I think it's actually the level of understanding the details of the problem at such a level that you can explain it better than your customer. And usually differently than how the market is currently explaining it. Because if the market was explaining it well and it worked, then people wouldn't have the problem. And so I think as a first step, I think people reach so far, like, I want to build an AI company, right? Instead of thinking, what is the problem that I will solve with AI? And so I think that that discipline around that process can be hugely impactful as well. So make sure you're getting feedback from the right person. You might not know who the right person is when you start your company. You have to be able to iterate and learn. And that the message that you say in your content is actually the most important thing. It's the same thing when I talked about advertising in 2020 and 2021. As good as your targeting can be, as good as everything else can be, if you say something that the person that's consuming the ad doesn't care about, the ad was worth nothing. It did nothing. And same thing if you go and make a speech. If you pay $50,000 to your CEO to make a speech at a conference and you make a speech and it sucks and everybody walks out and says, I didn't learn anything, what was that $50,000 sponsorship worth? It's the message that really, really matters as I continue to get more wisdom, should I say, like more experience, more wisdom around this, and we talk about volume on this podcast, and I believe in volume a ton. And all that you do when you do more volume, as long as it's done in the right way, is you accelerate the process to getting to the end.
Yep.
It's like going to the gym once a week or 7 days a week. Who's going to get in shape faster? And so that's the same thing when it comes to the podcast. And just, I guess that's maybe a reason why it took Refine Labs longer, because I didn't start the podcast until a year into the company. And then we really started to have the traction about a year later, a year into the podcast. And I didn't do as much volume or other things. So that could actually, just increasing the cycles is a massive way to get the insights faster and get to the end. It's never an end, it's an ongoing road. And sometimes I don't like giving advice on this topic because it's so art. This is an artistic skill. People that are able to do it really well, it's like painting $1 million painting, or even more than that. The value of it can be so good when it's created the right way. And so sometimes I don't like giving advice on things that really, really are more art than science. But I can talk through the things that I've learned and the things that I've gone through so far.
Exactly. And I think it's like, it's also just really focusing on how important it is. It's like you could have the best content execution, but if the actual fundamental premise of the topics you talk about, how you talk about them, the way you champion the problem, like if those aren't framed in the way that's resonating or differentiated, it's not going to your point, like the compass analogy that you use a lot with Passetto, like you're going to be 25 degrees off from where you ultimately want to end up, if not more. So I think just like even just reminding people about this is like before we get to the tactics and the platforms and the channels and all of that, like we at least have to have some sort of premise around, this core point of view messaging framework. And so
Yeah. Well, here's
let's,
the thing
yeah,
is that CEOs know that they need to understand sales. They know that they need to be able to run the P&L and understand the finance and understand what's going on the balance sheet and things like that. They know that they either need to understand the product or find somebody that is so good at product. And they leave this thing called marketing over here, and they don't even care to learn enough about it. And the insight is that if you as a CEO over the next 1 to 5 years do not fully embrace and understand both the power and the underlying mechanics of how marketing and pipeline creation actually work, you're going to put your company at a massive disadvantage. And for many companies, it is the most expensive, important problem. And so as a CEO, you have to be able to identify what is the most expensive, important problem / opportunity inside of our business. And then how do I drive it forward? How do I understand it enough so that I can drive it forward? It's that valuable. It's that important. And before it was sales, and sometimes it's technology and product, and other times it's this. But a lot of the times right now, I don't call it marketing anymore. I call it pipeline creation, which can include strategic marketing, revenue-oriented marketing, business development, and other investments.
which through this process that you just went through of refining your understanding of the problem and your own messaging around it, this pipeline creation framework has been developed. And this is one of the new the new things that you're championing and bringing out exactly to our point here. So
So the crazy thing is that the product was already done.
right,
Right. So
but you
the
reframed it.
product was already done. Now it is just reframed to a different stakeholder with a bigger problem.
Yes.
And so that is a crazy insight on its own too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's go through that. I mean, if you want, as much as you want to, like what what was your process um for, of course, like you had the content engine built, so that was able to inform a lot of it, I think, and we can go into that. But you also were having external, private conversations, or with customers or
Yeah.
non-customers,
Let's
things like that. Like what was your process going from I'm selling to a CMO and I'm saying this to now I'm selling to the CEO and I'm saying something else?
let's cut to the chase because we've been cooking for a while here. Okay, so from May forward, if you look at our NRR and customer success ratings, the companies that start with the project with the CEO are
Yeah.
off the chart. They expand fast with us. The whole company's happier and they're generally more successful and get better results. And when it comes to the CMO, we get pushed down to a VP or director and the project gets stalled because marketing can't fix the problem. And so you don't have this flywheel of expansion and results and things like that. And
Yep.
so it's as simple as that. Like we went through the project. We have whatever, we've gone through maybe 25 companies, and the ones that
Yeah.
have been led by a CEO are clearly the most successful customers from all different facets and angles. And so
Does that mean the CEO is, not to cut you off, does that mean the CEO is inbounding to you all, or they're just,
the first
the
couple,
front?
yeah, the first couple were, hey, I've been listening to your podcast over a phone call, and I thought this was pretty interesting, and I want you to speak with me and my CFO about like going through this process with you. So the first one, because we weren't out there fishing for CEOs, right? Like I
Right.
thought we were still like, this is marketing's going to own this.
Yep.
And so that was and then so you get that, you put the content out, right? If there's no content out with no message, that CEO never hears the content, never comes inbound, you never get the learning, which is why the process is so valuable. But then once you have that, you can basically just, especially in the early stages, you can literally qualitatively dissect the success of your customer, how you're multi-threaded, how much quantitatively, how much they're expanding, the metrics improvements that they're getting, how fast it's happening. And you can really have that dialed in. And when
Are you having conversations to like qualitative conversations to also then pair with those quantitative insights on the success, metrics and stuff like that?
I'm involved in every one of the projects.
Yep, exactly.
I'm the one pitching the CEO the $1 million expansion to fix their $250 million pipeline problem next year. So, like, yeah, I'm in. So and it's another learning as an entrepreneurial CEO. Like you have to be in there. This is not outsourceable. You have to be working with the customers. You have to prove the expansion process works and that your product and offering and pricing work. You have to prove that your messaging works, both in a sales conversation and at a narrative level. You have to use the product just like your customer would. And I think that that level of care and attention to detail, like I'm not an attention to detail person. But when it comes to the way that I do it, like I said, is more like art. So I am very attentive to the details, but how I get there doesn't feel very scientific to people.
So you looked at that, you had quantitative data that were saying these customers are getting the best results. Not only they're getting the best results, but we're able to do our best work for them as well.
Oh my God, that's a huge, that one is like, you can see the team when they work on this set of the 50% of customers that get led by a CEO. And then my exact same team, including myself working with the other companies where it's typically led by marketing. It's not a hate on marketing. It's just the reality of our business right now that it's just way more fun, way more engaging, way more growth. Your ideas actually go into practice when we work with those customers, and the other ones, it's a slog for the most part. And so it's another interesting variable of as a signal that isn't business related necessarily. It's just who are the customers that you like to work with.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. And what then was your process of evolving from there, that insight, the messaging? For example, like I know you obviously the insights didn't stop. You had those initial probably kind of assessments of it and thinking, but like at some point you actually have to switch over the messaging. What prompts you to feel confident? Like, what were those things that made you feel confident this is in fact the right move to make, rather than anecdotal, in isolation, some random examples and stuff like that? Because it's a big move. It's a bold move.
So the thing that I've learned is change your narrative, not your product marketing. Don't change what your website says unless it's detrimental, but usually it's not. It's just like not 100% fully clear. Change your narrative first, let it push through, run the sales conversations, let the customer communicate their problem. You present the solution, you prove that it works, then you start to make improvements in the product marketing and the website. I think it's a crazy hack.
Really good.
You have a super risk-free way to test messaging. And so there are other tools that you can use for messaging tests, which I support as well. But this is just I just think it's a crazy advantage.
And so that narrative then is getting pushed through where you're testing that.
Podcast, LinkedIn events.
Yep. Content, but the two C's, content and conversations, basically.
Oh, and right? Sales conversations and expansion renewal conversations. Good point. Yeah.
Exactly. And so then what you're looking for then is that like overwhelming positive reinforcement, sentiment, outreach, things like that. It was kind of
like a perfect storm. Okay. So on one side, we have these customers that started with us in July, but now have been through the cycle of 2 or 3 months with us, have seen what we can do. We have a plan to make the impact. We have the trust with the leadership team. You get those expansions, and then like a week later, the Pavilion conference is in Austin, just in my backyard, in like the perfect time. And you have all these go-to-market leaders, CROs, CEOs, CMOs, RevOps, 500 or more of them in this room, and you can start talking to people, and you just have everyone saying, we have a pipeline problem. And the undertone sentiment is, we don't know how to fix it. And I don't have confidence that our CMO can, as a CRO will say, I don't have confidence. They won't say it. It's an undertone. I don't have confidence my CMO can fix this problem. And they're also saying, I don't have confidence that I can fix the problem. Right. So those are some of the things that are going on. So you have that because at the top level, the message was you need to view your whole, you have to look at your whole go-to-market holistically, which I totally believe in. Yeah. But then once you look at it holistically, it breaks into new logo and expansion pretty clearly. And then And so you can look at those. You need to know GRR and NRR to plan marketing, but the whole point of looking at it holistically is to optimize the pipeline creation process. And so it's a reframing. You focus in on the problem that people truly have and communicate that you're built to solve. Are we going to help a company fix their GRR from 70% to 90% over 2 years? No, we're not. And so it's important that if they have that problem, that they know and they fix that problem instead of trying to fix hiring us for $1 million to try to fix their pipeline problem, right? So it's an important step of just diagnosing what the problem is that I think a lot of companies struggle with. So we can help with diagnosing the problem, and then if the diagnosis is that you have dysfunction within your pipeline creation process leading to low ROI, missing pipeline targets, sales team is starving, lowering forecast, sometimes marketing still celebrating if they're hitting their plan. If you have that level of dysfunction in your pipeline creation process that can be measured quantitatively with a metric, that then you can calculate how much this is costing us every quarter that we don't solve it, which is fucking extreme for a company. And then you can decide, is it worth it to spend $1 million to try and fix this $50 million per quarter problem? Or should we just roll the dice and let our team try to fix it for the third time this year?
Okay, let's take that example at the Pavilion conference. When you're in those just one-on-one conversations or group conversations, and you're wanting to learn these things, like you're wanting to hear how they are framing their own problem and things like that. How are you actually, going about those conversations? Are you prompting them with questions, like open-ended or direct, or like, I know it's, this is like
It's
the
an
art
art,
of
bro.
conversation, but like this is actually like where you get these insights. So I think it's really important to not seem too self-serving in these either. Like you're trying to pitch them something or sell something. You want to get the real information.
Yeah, if it's something that I've learned how to master, and most of the time it works. Sometimes it comes back to bite me if I'm being honest, but I think net it's a positive thing. Is that I'll say something that I don't necessarily believe in order to feel their reaction. It is a nonverbal reaction. And so I'll say something which ends up being my hypothesis. Like it feels like companies, most of the companies that I work with, like can't figure out how to do X, Y, and Z. And someone might say, actually, we have that figured out. We have a fucking pipeline problem, right? And so it's not as long as you don't get the confirmation bias, it's a great way to tease out, is what I'm saying something that people respond to? So I was saying our previous message, right? And people are like, actually, that isn't the problem I have. This is the problem that I have. Here you go.
Yes.
And it's more or less them reframing the same problem in their point of view.
Super smart.
And so then they give you that back. You hear that 4, 5, 6 times from people that work at the 500-person private equity owned company that's your exact target customer, that feels the problem, that it costs them a ton of money, and then you can start to narrow in. It also helped us narrow in on the segment of customer that we want to help just by quantifying the problem, right? If you're too small, then the magnitude of the problem is not large enough to pay us to fix it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe we'll build a down market offer, but right now there's plenty. We have 8 customers and there's 2,000 in the US, and we're going to focus on that segment first.
That makes sense. That's a really, really practical takeaway there. So let's talk about then like how you're using the content process. Cause like, I think the question here, and this is probably similar to what you realized just with Passetto and who you're marketing to in general, is like, who do you believe should own this process? Product marketing, CEO, like
the person who owns the long-term company strategy is one way to put it. Another way that I would look at it is the person that is the majority shareholder if they're operational. So you could look at it in both ways. Like for a lot of companies, it's the same person, right?
Yes.
The CEO owns long-term strategy and is also the majority shareholder, unless they raise a bunch of institutional capital and dilute themselves over time. But usually at the beginning, it's the same person. So that is who I think I watch companies outsource this to an external evangelist or their VP of marketing. And then it's just an interview show of interviewing people in the market, promoting somebody else's perspective, not your own company's perspective, not getting the overall learning. And it's purely a promotional tactic, not a strategy. And when used the right way, it's actually the fuel that drives the company's strategy, a combination of having this message to the market broad, where seriously, if the message hits and a CMO believes that they have the problem and they believe that I'm right and they can't fix it themselves and they forward it to the CEO and they make a case for fixing it, it's like it's in the bag. You know what I mean? Like that is how the content process overall works.
So it's not necessarily even then to you about access to these conversations as well. Like literally market research through the mechanism of the content, while also audience building, promotional, articulating your own points of view and stuff like that. But like having conversations with ICP through the content.
I'm smiling for those of you that aren't watching the video, because if you're me and you do it, right? So if you're the CEO and you do it, you can feel it. You could feel it. It fundamentally changes. There's a momentum behind you. More people want to talk to you. More people want to work at your company. When you get the narrative right, people feel it. Smart people get it. They say they're ahead of the game. They understand the problem differently. They know what's going on. They see where the future's going. And then you get messages from people that want to work with you. They get messages that want you to consult with them. You get messages of people that want to join your company because they think that you're right. And so when you get it right, you can feel it almost immediately.
What would you say to the let's say they meet those two criteria, they own long-term strategy and or they're majority shareholder. And this is a very common pushback, especially at a certain scale, of like someone owning the content, owning essentially like the face of the content brand, because one of the reasons being the value that you and I are talking about right now is that they don't have the time for it. How would you frame the overcoming that objection, essentially? Because like obviously you're missing out on, number one, the feeling of your message resonating, and then number two, that then being able to be transferred into every other part of the company. And so it can't, I mean, like you've got teams who are, let's call it $50 million in revenue, and they will have really credible people on their team, like subject matter experts and things like that, who are the face of the content brand, which I do think is a strong play. But like the question is, just for this particular piece of it, the point of view and the messaging framework and the feedback loop, like, yeah, how important do you think it is for someone who's sitting in that seat to actually be the face of the content brand for that reason?
At the highest level, I think that the way that we build companies will change, is changing.
Mm.
It's changing before our eyes. And I've remained committed to the strategy that I took originally, and I believe that a lot more entrepreneurs will take it. And I've made this argument so many times philosophically around it, but I'm going to make it with real numbers, okay? I like, as the owner of this company, and the most powerful thing that you can do to get customers, understand your market, accelerate growth and things like that, is this process. Because this process involves doing everything. It's not just the content. It's doing the sales calls, it's expanding the customers, it's working with the customer, it's getting the result, it's feeding that back in. It is your strategy. And it is the highest leverage thing, and it's the number one way that you can build your company without raising external capital. And then as the owner of the company for the next 5 years, instead of being on the train where you burn money and then every 2 years you don't take distributions, you just have a salary, you're employed by basically the board and the investors. You can't take a distribution for 5 years. You have to raise money every 2 years to keep up with it. So imagine the amount of money that's lost purely in the distributions, because VCs typically run break even or burn, where if you ran your company profitably over that period of time, you might take out $10 million in distributions over those 5 years.
Yep.
And then at the end of the 5 years, you have a company that you own most of. Maybe you gave some points to employees, some strategic people. Maybe you made M&A and had some rollover equity, but maybe you own 60 to 80% of the company. And then you sell it at 20 million in revenue and make more money than if you built it to $1 billion company and raised all the capital.
Yep.
And I just think that there's a totally new way to build companies that is better for founders, better for teams, better for customers, and ironically, better for investors. And there's a small subset of companies, some AI companies and some other things that deserve the VC infusion of $100 million. But most SaaS businesses don't need it. It gets wasted on 50% of revenue going to sales and marketing because they have an excess and they're driven to burn. They don't make the hard strategic choices that they need to. And I think that overall people will start to see that I can fund the growth of my company by getting customers for not a lot of money, that I don't need to have a 4-year CAC payback like the VC model, that I can do something like this and pay back the cost of acquiring a customer in 2 months. And then for the rest of time, it's straight profit because I'm smarter. I don't need a massive team. I don't need $1 million advertising budget. Not at the early stage. It makes sense to do those things at 100 mil. And I'm actually starting to think now that this type of strategy doesn't need to be forever. That once you can get it to like, think about Mark Benioff, for example. Once you get the company to a mass scale, the personal brand is no longer needed. The personal brand built the company brand, then the company brand takes over when they're at scale. It doesn't have to be. Most people don't. A lot of people don't do this because they're like, I want to exit my company and I don't want to be stuck, or I don't want to be like a asset around this. And I just simply do not believe that to be true. My other businesses that I'm not operational anymore continue to do well and have positive business trends and performance. And my content doesn't support that message almost at all anymore. And because the company brand has now exceeded, or at least has a brand of its own that people know and trust, that have a lot of successful customers and word of mouth and things like that. And so I'm encouraging people to consider this as you can do it for as long as you want, right? And if you're the majority shareholder, you are also the main majority beneficiary of the input that you're doing. It just simply is the highest leverage thing that you can do. And so people that say, I don't have time, just have decided that the other things that they're doing create more leverage. Subconsciously, that's what they've decided. And so going to the product meeting on Thursdays and sitting there for 90 minutes and hearing the roadmap. Going to the gym at 7 a.m., which I think is super important, but they've made a conscious choice that the gym is more important than posting on LinkedIn. And so it's just about, this is not a productivity hack, right? It's not about analyzing your calendar and finding 30 minutes to do a fucking podcast. That is not what this is. It's not, we're not talking that way. It's seeing what's actually going on, which is that to build the best product, you need to be most in touch with your customer, not have the best dev team and the most money. To build the best narrative, you need to be closest to your customer, not do a $500,000 category design project with someone. You need to be closest to your customer. To be able to sell deals and close deals and expand customers, you also have to be in there. And so I think just when you really root it in fundamentals, the fundamentals are timeless and they're the most powerful, and you can put money on top of it to mask it or to make it quote unquote less important. But oddly, you just create different problems when you have more scale. So, and there's a lot of companies that just had a big capital raises throughout the past 5 years and at very big valuations. And now that those have normalized, like people will tell me, oh, their product must suck. Or, oh, they like really must not be able to there must be a product issue, right? They're 100 million in revenue and people are like, oh, it must be a product issue. It's because they didn't manage their cap table. And that they scaled the company with a 4-year CAC payback. And you can't, it's hard to just cut your CAC payback period in half and maintain growth and not have a massive disruption to your business. And so the problem gets created as you build. Like they feel the problem at the end, but there's years of decisions and work that create the problem and have created this problem for a lot of companies. So yeah.
But yeah, that was awesome. Bunch on that. Kind of to our point here is like being closest to your customer is like obviously a central theme to this, and the content plus conversations is one of the best ways to do that. So the content piece that often I will hear as like, hey, this person doesn't have the time to invest in it, or we only can do one thing per month or something like that. It's actually not just about driving pipeline directly from that piece of content that is often what it's being measured against, but it's also losing the ability to partially 50% of the ability to be closest to your customer, because the more things you put out, the more feedback you're going to get. And that just informs. Same thing with the conversations, obviously, the one-on-one. So I'm putting those as equal importance.
Yeah, let's go there for just just a second. Like,
Yep.
um, the companies that are buying technology and investing a bunch of time to measure the success of their content
Mm.
is like trying to fix a light on a boat while there's a huge hole in it and the whole thing's sinking. It's literally just, you can do it, you can fix the light and the light will work, but the boat's going down. And it's not figuratively like the company's going down, it's that
Right.
they're fixing a small insignificant problem while there's a large problem over here that's the real thing. And the real thing is that B2B companies do not measure their pipeline creation process properly, and they do not have a
Yeah.
framework of how to run it, which includes, like I mentioned, business development and BDRs, marketing investments, partners, strategic marketing, and things, and brand. And that collectively, those things do not get measured properly, and they get so lost in this like attribution battle, and
Yes.
they lose sight of the big picture. And a lot of companies have that right now, where at the attribution, deep tactical million slide deck thing, it can look like the marketing is performing, but you're over
Yep.
there in the boardroom and you're listening to what's happening. There's no way this stuff can be working. Our CRO's confident we have a pipeline problem. We're about to down forecast Q1.
Mm.
Our performance and pipeline production has been declining for 3 or 4 quarters. Like, the marketing's not working, or is it? Like, and so to me, that's the fixing the content measurement is just people get so lost in fixing micro problems instead of the high leverage real problems, myself included. So like in my own business, you can, especially, it's like nice to have someone come in, and we talk about this sometimes, me and you, like, it's nice to have somebody just to talk to that's outside of your company, that you can talk to and say, you're like, oh, our team is like really struggling. And then they ask you a couple questions and they can convince you that your team's actually super high performing. They can help you calibrate. They can help you see things that you don't see. And so I think that can be valuable too.
One of your recent, I think it was on the most recent GTM live you did, was the analogy of like asking the content marketer what's the ROI of what you're doing, like prove the ROI of what you're doing, is like asking somebody working at a car manufacturer whose job is to put the tires on the car, and that's what they do on the assembly line. They just put the tires on every time, tire, 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 going up to them and asking them what's the ROI of what you're doing, in relation to the success of our, output and sell through of these vehicles. And
I totally love it. I love,
Yep.
I said it, so, but like, I love it because the car needs wheels, right? Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
your company needs a website. So saying what is the ROI of the website just doesn't make any sense. It's like, this company could not run if we didn't have a website. We need one. We can try to estimate the impact of spending $100,000 on it and seeing how that works. But you get down to this micro issue around like, what is the ROI of this one little thing that we have to do in order for this factory to run? And those are many of the questions that get asked overall, and I think they're generally the wrong questions. And I think that we should not be asking the people that work in our revenue factory to measure the ROI of their job, to measure the ROI of the revenue factory, or to make critical long-term strategic improvements to the factory. That is not their job. Their job is to work in the factory and put on the wheels. Other people come in and try to figure out, how do we put the wheels on better? If we use a different glue, could we save $1,000 per car? Somebody else does that. And so companies have the people that are building the tires, trying to make the process of how to build the tires better, and they are doing these really small things that don't make any impact. And so there's a clear separation that I see that factories run on that B2B companies don't right now, that become one of the core reasons B2B companies aren't innovating, why most of the new experiments that people always say marketing needs experiments, why do all of the experiments keep failing? It's because we ask the question about who the tires instead of look at factory performance.
I'm getting close to the point where I see like essentially like a flagship content engine as just being something similar to the value and necessity of a website. I mean, would you agree with that? Like, because and what that flagship content engine is could be different for different companies, and the pillar of it could be set up differently. There's many different ways to approach that, but it is really tough, and I feel for some of these content teams who are being measured against short term, inbound lead metrics and KPIs off of like, a new YouTube channel that they're setting up, which like the value of these things is unquestionable. And they're like, and the value can be measured across multiple categories, including inbound pipeline,
Hmm.
but also the other motions of marketing and sales that can help lower CAC and make things more efficient overall. But yeah, I guess like to your point,
It's
you
about the
need tires on the car.
it's yeah, you need tires on the car, and it's really about the process of when is the right time to do
Yep.
these things versus the other things. It's really hard, and big companies do this. It's really hard to be like, oh, we need to invest all our money in brand that we, by the way, can't measure accurately. We do not look at an ROI or overall performance target, but we say that it's going to make an impact in 12 to 24 months.
Hmm.
It's hard to make that investment when you can't pay your bills. Whether it's your own personal investment or the company, and it's obviously like an extreme example, but that's the
Yep.
situation that it's in. That like they're like, we should invest more in brand, and meanwhile the metrics that they have on the 10 million that they already spend do not add up. And so obviously adding this thing while the factory is failing is going to put pressure on all that stuff and cut that experiment. And so it needs to be a methodical process of
Agreed.
get our factory to run properly
Yep.
with repeatable, executable programs that happen through people, process, and technology, and then put one new thing in. And if our YouTube, you could spread multiple out.
Right.
And so you have the machine that's running, and then you have 2 or 3 things that you're sprinkling on top of it. And if one of those things hits, it drives your growth for the next couple of years. And this is like, I'm going to reframe it, but it's basically the revenue R&D framework that I talked about years ago, just better positioned at this point. That is how you run growth for companies, where the whole company knows these are our bets. There are only 3 of them. We need one of them to hit our plan, and the other 2 are the upside. Instead of the growth marketing team is doing this little thing over here, and if they get it, we'll get 2% better. And over here, if they do something, we'll get 1% better. And it's just separating the difference between optimizing within a department or within a process versus optimizing across the entire thing.
Yeah, I think we should save like I'd like to go deep on that in maybe the next session, which is like the sequencing of basically content is a pillar, like the different approaches to content. There's YouTube only, there's podcasts, there's short form video, there's newsletters, there's written content for the blog, for your blog. There's a million different things you could do. But content being the highest level pillar of that seems like it is something that every company needs to include in their pipeline creation framework at some point, to your point. But I think at some point you and I should go deep on like the sequencing of that and where and how to know when to fit that in, and
Yeah.
then know that it is working, essentially.
Yeah. Like some of these things I just don't even have the energy to say anymore. But like,
Yeah.
the reason that companies do not run paid social advertising in the right way that delivers the best ROI on the investments, and they bleed money on LinkedIn ads every single month, year over year, and why they don't have an organic social presence, and why their executives don't do those things, why they do not have a thriving live show that they do with their customers and market and all these things, is because the way that marketing is measured directly disallows it. There's no other way around it. And so I've said it so many times that I'm like, almost tired of hearing myself say it. But it's the root of the issue. And people are stuck continuing to try to fix the problem the wrong way, or take on this endeavor of trying to do this marketing strategy without changing the metrics, and then watch it fail in 6 months and go back to doing what you were doing before.
Mm.
it's tough medicine for people to take, but that is it. Like this, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think the reason I brought it up now, especially, is just because of some of the topics you've been talking about recently, which is like elevating the conversation to the CEO, CRO level, like board level, and the metrics and KPIs that they're looking at. And I don't want to get into the brand conversation because that's like, a big black box or whatever. But um, content is not easily measurable. But then at the same time, we also have to measure to of some degree of knowing that it is working and stuff like that. And so there, it's
Do
almost
you?
feeling like it's a little bit well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like
like I'm
I
at the
don't
point of
I believe you just
challenging.
need it fundamentally.
Like if you spend $1 million a year on marketing SDRs and generate 20 million in pipe, and when that at 25%, you spend $1 million, you get 4 million in revenue, then you pay your sales team and you have a 6 or 8 month CAC payback period. Does it matter whether you have attribution touch points on your fucking LinkedIn video? No, it doesn't. Everybody knows that the strategy is working. And so it's just like, it's elevate as executives to know that what determines success is the business performance. It has nothing to do with the attribution or touch points or any of the micro bullshit that, frankly, the marketing department has made up to prove the value of marketing. That's what all of the tools are built. That's the premise of what all the tools were built for. It was not built to help you drive strategy. It was not built to help your executive team align. It was helped to prove the value of marketing things. And so it's biased to measure the old stuff that companies used to do. Look at the tools that measure the success of display ads on view through conversions from ABM accounts. Like, it's so far from saying that the ads were effective, but they can make the measurement dial in to say we should keep spending this $15,000 a month through 6 cents. So just the touch points only matter to understand why the business KPIs look the way that they do. If the business KPIs are great, we should look in and say, what are all the things that are working? How do we max them out? How do I put more money on the shit that's already working? And if you're benchmark, average, median, you can say we're doing pretty good, but we have a lot of opportunity to go. How do we move forward from here? It's good to know that we're at the median. We're not low performing, because many companies are at the median and think they're low performing. And then you have the companies that really need to hear you're at the low performing of the spectrum. That means, what does that mean? The stuff that you're doing is not working. And it's not marketing's fault. It's a go-to-market problem, not a marketing problem, even though marketing deploys a lot of investments in that area. And so being able to look at that as a team and say, the biggest issue is a pipeline problem. Most of the investments that can fix it in the short term come from the marketing budget. So let's figure out how to set marketing up to use that budget to move these KPIs.
Love it. Yeah, it's a big topic. And it's tough. I feel for, the content teams that I talk to a lot, because some of these things are out of their control to some degree. And so
totally out of control. It's five levels in the organization below who needs to make the decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, we can save that for another session, go a little bit deeper on. But the POV thing, especially for just where you are right now with Passetto, I think it was incredibly valuable. So appreciate you going through it. Any final words on just that in general, like, the messaging POV, like now how you're thinking about it, if there's anything you're thinking about carrying it forward to the next step for you with Passetto, now that you've honed in on sort of this feedback loop has been hitting for you, how you're thinking about carrying it forward, or anything else?
Keep cooking, baby. We got we have a great set of customers that are in agreements through 2025. We get to cook. We get to co-create the product with them. We get to be in the details. We get to figure new things out. And so you have a narrative. People know they have a problem. You're only 10 months into your company. Now you got to prove that you can actually fix the problem. You can quantify how much the impact is. Their go-to-market efficiency goes from 400% to 250% as planned in our financial plan. They add $150 million to their company in 12 months. That gives us a different story to tell to every single customer after that. So those are now
that's when the website changes.
Now it's time to execute. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people undervalue that, by the way. I think the idea as a SaaS founder of getting the result that you promised to your customer, not that
100%.
you deployed the tool and onboarded them, that they
100%.
get the actual result, should drive more founders to have a professional services arm that you get paid for, not that you charge $3,000 for implementation as a loss leader and then you try to outsource it to agencies long term, that you build it and you guarantee that the customer fixes their problem and your NRR goes through the roof and it changes your company and you get paid to do it. And it's an R&D arm, and it's, to me, I'm starting to get blown, because I consult with companies that have 93% NRR, right? So they're losing customers from their base every year. And you can see that it's tough for them to change at scale, right? But companies that are building from the beginning could build totally differently. And I think that most software solutions that get sold, you can look at MarTech, look at 6sense, or look at any of the ABM tools. The tool might be great, but they do not help their customer get the true value out of the tool. They do not help change the KPIs. They do not help to executives to align at the executive level, not even to set up and integrate the tools together. And so and that's a $200,000 investment that typically does not get an ROI in the companies that we analyze, and a lot of companies are ripping it out right now. And so as a founder, can you see what's happening right now for companies that are at scale? You can understand their metrics and say, how do I design my company differently so that doesn't happen to me at 50 million ARR? And the thing is to care about the actual result that you get the customer. And if you do actually care about it, why are we giving it away for free in a customer success manager that isn't equipped to solve the problem? There are, like, a lot of CSMs are babysitters for customers. They have talent. I'm not talking down on them, but it's different than being an executive level consultant that helps you implement an ABM tool. It's a different person that you need to do that. And you could charge $300,000 in professional services, and then your NRR also gets better while you get paid. So we'll see. Big companies won't change it. They're too far along. I'm interested to see if the small companies change how companies are built, from what was different from the 2012 to 2020, 2021 timeframe, and how you go about it. The capital structure is just way different now. So I'm excited, and it's weird because people have asked me for years. They're like, Chris, when are you going to write a book? And I'm always like, no, like, actually, I don't want to write a book about demand gen. Like, I don't. But this is what I want to write a book about. The new way to build a company or a group, the new way to be an entrepreneur. That I think is that it doesn't involve raising money and thinking about first principles differently. Knowing that you don't have to only build one company in your career is powerful. Knowing that one company can be a stepping stone to another one, just like a real estate investor thinks, I'll buy this 10-unit apartment and I'll hold it for a couple of years, then I'm going to sell that and I'm going to go to the 30 apartment. You can use businesses as stepping stones and things like that. I just think there's so much power in knowing what options you have as an entrepreneur rather than just taking the path that everyone's taken for the past 10 years.
That was killer. And I would actually encourage everybody, if you haven't seen it yet, you probably have, Chris, but like basically what you've just described is has been hitting, online recently to some degree too, which is the term founder mode. Paul Graham wrote an essay recently called Founder Mode and said the best founders are the ones that are in the details, and they don't outsource these big key areas exactly like you've just described. So that was a great essay. I think everybody should check it out. This was awesome, man. Appreciate you.
Dude, love it every time.
We'll catch everybody on the next one.
Thanks, homie. I'll talk to you again this afternoon. See ya.
All right, see ya.